Okay, hello and welcome to MSDynamicsWorld.com's Fall 2013 CRM webcast series. I'm Jason Gumpert, and I am joined today by JC Quintana, a longtime CRM strategist and technologist and author of the book, CRM to the People, speaking frankly about customer relationship management. JC is also HP's Chief Customer Experience Innovation Executive, and we are really pleased to have him joining us today. We invite you to also add your feedback and ask questions during today's presentation. You can use the chat block or the Q&A block that you'll see on the webcast session to the right of the slides. And with that, please allow me to introduce our speaker, JC Quintana. JC, are you there?
I am here, Jason. Thank you so much. Excellent. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm glad that you took the time to participate in this presentation. And as I'm looking across and seeing some of the emails that have been sent throughout the day, it looks like there's some friendly faces and some friendly voices out there on the other side. So those of you that I know, clients, colleagues, friends, thank you for joining. And I think that several others will be joining as well as we go along. Let me get my presentation going real quick. And Jason, let me see. I've clicked on the CRM title tab, and
so we are seeing your slides, JC.
All right, I cannot see mine for some reason. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. So someone's so technology inclined. Sometimes I get go back to the 1950s. All right, perfect. Well, Jason introduced me, and it's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is JC Quintana, as pure coincidence will have it, I happen to be in Miami, Florida right now at the Customer Experience Exchange Conference for North America. And it's really interesting looking at the name tags of the folks who are here and the companies that are participating, some of which I'm sure you belong to. And listening to the questions this morning as the panelists from Forrester and other companies went up to speak, it was really interesting to see the kinds of people who are interested in addressing this question of where customer experience fits in our overall initiatives and plans for CRM. And I'm talking about companies like AT&T, Bank United, Capital One, and a dozen others. And the folks that are attending and participating, which traditionally had been people like the IT directors and vice presidents of ITs and CIO. We're now seeing that the people who are participating more often in the question of what CRM will do for a company and where customer experience fits in that strategy are really people like the VPs of customer experience, the VPs of operations are getting involved, new titles are being created like, customer touch point executive or VP of customer touch points. And so it was great to see that take place. Not only here in Miami, but also throughout the world, and also to see the kinds of folks who are getting involved. What I want to do today is I want to take a little bit of time to bring up a question that I see often when I go out and talk to clients, which is, the marketing director has come to me and has said, we want to launch a customer experience or customer or CX experience campaign. What does that mean in terms of what I'm already doing with CRM? How does it fit overall as a strategy? How do I define it, and how do we work together? So today, I want to take time to define what CRM is, not only in the context of what customer experience is in general, but this term that we're using now more frequently and steadily, which is customer experience management. Every year, the last few years, Forrester has been putting together something called a customer experience index, and the one for this year is out and available. So I want to take a little time to talk about what it is that Forrester is saying and why it is important to you as a company, as a partner, if you're a Microsoft partner on the phone today, and to the industry in general. And of course, I want to also take time to talk about how the two strategies work together. So whether CRM as a strategy fits into customer experience or customer experience tools fit into CRM. And as we conclude our hour today, I want to talk about why is that important in terms of revenue and retention and building relationships with clients. All right, so I want to take 1 second. You have a polling tool on the right side of your screen, right above the chat area. And what I want to do is, by yeses and nos, take a second. I'm curious to know how many of you folks are currently undergoing not customer relationship initiatives and projects, but specifically customer engagement management projects. And I'll give you a second to respond. Yes or no?
And just to jump in, you can use the chat that you see to the right to share your views, and the panelists will see that.
Excellent. So I'm not seeing anybody responding right now. So I'll go ahead and move on, and maybe people are having lunch, Jason.
So there are a couple coming in, and they are actually they're coming directly to me right now. So we have a few no's and one yes. And just as a note to everyone, if you could send to all panelists instead of just to the host, that way JC can make sure to see it too. But I can tell you there are some coming in, JC, and it's
perfect.
20 toward no, but yeah.
So 20 towards no. Excellent. And that's what we're seeing as well. And, you know, in speaking about being at the conference right now, I'm getting sort of the same visibility into, even at the senior level, of those folks that I mentioned a second ago, the VPs of operation and VP of customer effectiveness and customer touch point. I'm getting really almost the same perspective that folks are seeing traditionally a CRM push and all the things that entails across sales, marketing, and support. But we're not seeing a lot of people saying, hey, we're getting ready to start a customer engagement initiative. So let me talk first about what customer experience is and what it looks like, and let me tell you about how it fits within CRM and why it's important to consider that. So first of all, by definition, if you go over to Wikipedia, our friends at Wikipedia define customer experience basically as the sum of all experiences that customers have with you. So whether it be if you're a retail customer, you have an experience between you and your customer at the retail floor level, or they go to your website, or they interact with someone from customer service because they called and something was defective. That sum of those experiences is what we typically define as CX for short, but really as customer experience. Now, the competency that manages that, we are now calling CX management or customer experience management. And since I'm really big on definitions, I would just love definitions of what and how they fit into things. If you think about what we've been saying over the years is customer relationship management, which is how we handle and direct our relationships with customers with a very purposeful and meaningful degree of skill. The same is true when we define customer experience management. So we say that just like we manage our relationships using CRM with a certain degree of skill, because that's what the word management it really means, to handle or direct with a degree of skill, which is purposeful, meaningful, and intentional, CEM does exactly the same thing with the customer experience. Now, at this point, you stop and you think, well, is that really what I've been doing all along? Have I really been managing experiences under the title of CRM? And that is true. I think that that's going to be true for a percentage of you folks who have been considering the management of each individual experiences through a CRM application. But for the most people are not managing it from that direction. So let me take for 1 second a view of what the business looks like, and let me dive down into how it is that a business, whether it be new or an existing business, is approaching the ideas of customer experience and customer management, experience management individually. So if you were to start a new business right now, whether it be a tackle stand or a very sophisticated technology company, all companies go through what Pinure and Osterwald call the business model generator. And these are the foundational 9 business building blocks of any business. Before you buy a CRM system or even start talking about CRM systems or strategies or even customer experience in general, businesses go through this model traditionally to understand how their business is going to work and how they're going to leverage products and services to clients. And what's really interesting to me as I work with clients all over the globe, and this is true in North America, Latin America, Asia, and Europe, where I've done business, majority of the time, a lot of the decisions that will drive your customer engagement and customer relationship management strategies have already been formulated way above at the C-level by the folks who are building the business and structuring it to make decisions about how they'll sell their products. So, for example, at the very, very beginning of any business endeavor, we ask the question of our customer. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Michael LaBeouf, who wrote How to Win Customers and Keep Them for Life. And the book is very much about making the customer the center of any endeavor. And so the first step in any business endeavor is identifying for who it is that we're creating value, who are our customers, and even more important than that, who are our most important customers. And later on, when I talk about relationships, I talk a lot about how we have a tendency to view people as customers and somewhat dehumanize what that means. We tend to take the definition of what a customer is, and we kind of make it very transactional. The idea that the very first thing that we do when we build a business is identify not only who our customers are, but who our most important customers are, is also foundational to CEM and CEX. The second thing a business usually does is understand the definition of value. So if I've already defined my customer and my most important customers, the people that I want to do business with, I also want to take time to find out what are their problems and, on what values do we want to deliver to the customer. To me, if I'm in the retail, the value that I deliver may not be necessarily textiles or specific to a dress or a suit, but really I'm delivering a feeling. LaBeouf said that people really don't buy nails. What they're really buying is a stable door. And that is very true across every industry. We define our value proposition by bundling the products and services that we want to offer to the people that we identify in step number one. So as long as I can satisfy the need of the customer, I am defining value proposition. And without going too much into the rest of the process, but kind of summarizing, you'll notice I highlighted areas of each of the 9 building blocks that talk specifically about customers, their experiences, their value, and in each of those sections, you'll see at least 1 or 2 questions that goes right back to the very first question, which is, who is my customer? So for example, even if I am the person who is managing and identifying through what channels we are going to deliver our products and to who and what customer segments I'm going to sell my product and services to, I am still asking the question of how we integrate them into customer routines. In other words, it's not good enough to say that I'm going to buy a retail store and launch a retail store or a chain of retail stores in several cities. By identifying the channel, by default, I am also having to ask a question of what are the customer routines that I need to take into account in order for me to deliver via those channels. Now, the question of customer relationship is easy in the context of this presentation because we've asked that question time and time again. If you're here in this presentation today, it's very likely that you've asked the questions that are posed during the customer relationship building block evaluation process. And that is, again, what kind of customers do I want to have a relationship with? What are those specific customer segments? Which ones do we have now, and which ones do I want to build in the future, and how do I want to build it? And also, how do I want to integrate with the rest of the business models? How will I identify that customers, sell to them, but not only win them, but also retain them? And as you build your business, questions about value and the customer, about how they'll bring in revenue stream, will be questions that your CEOs will pose and the people who are building the process will pose. They'll ask questions about key resources. Then they'll ask questions as to who are the people who are most significant to the business in order to meet our value proposition. They're going to ask who are those key resources that are going to interact with the customers, and how will they and their behavior help us to generate revenue stream. And because we are humans and these are human interactions that we're talking about, we'll ask the question about which will be the key activities that will deliver our value proposition. Now, in the context of CRM, a lot of times we tend to talk about those key activities in terms of business processes or workflow. And as it relates specifically to Microsoft Dynamics CRM, we tend to see that as CRM processes or workflows through Workflow Foundation or just through CRM workflows, and we tend to see those as interactions. So if any of you have ever worked in Dynamics and has ever gone out to an activity, this is what I'm talking about here. That when a salesperson, a marketing person, or a support person opens up that activity screen, these activities, as established by the business, should have been identified as key activities. Now, we have other activities that can be general, and we want to record in the CRM record. We want to always record what was that activity and how it went with the customer. But as a minimum, key activities are very much a part of our customer relationships. Okay? And finally, we also want to extend those relationships to our key partnerships. And so we know that regardless of what business you're in, there are often circular relationships that extend outside of your immediate circle of influence of your employees out to a partner community or a key supplier or key resource that helps you win and retain customers. And so activities are always gauged not only based on the interactions that you have with customers, but also based on the activities that you will have with your key partners. And lastly, one that we don't often take into account is cost structure. When I build a business, I'm always very mindful of how much it's going to cost me to acknowledge the customer segment questions, the value proposition questions, the CRM question itself, my relationship with resources, and how I deliver those activities. Why? Because each of those things costs money. And so I have to make a decision as to how much money I want to spend and what kind of cost structure I want to put in place in order to attain those clients. And if there are specific value propositions that we're delivering to the client via a number of different channels, interacting with them in a number of different key activities, I'm always asking the question, how much is it going to cost me? So I'll give you a perfect example. Call centers in general address the question of interaction with clients in a couple of different ways. One of them is the level of satisfaction that they had with that experience, but there are also call center metrics that evaluate how quickly an agent was able to resolve the problem, and then they gauge based on service level agreements and matrix whether or not that was acceptable or not. So if I have a call with a customer service agent and they stop and realize that what I really, really need in order for me to stay as a faithful customer of that company is to have a little bit more interaction and work through a problem for a little longer, a lot of times call centers discourage that. Why? Because it becomes a question of structure and a question of value and a question of how much does it cost to retain that organization and call center in lieu of the experience the customer had. And I'll talk more about that and how it is important to kind of address both. All right. So again, that's looking at it from a very, very high level and looking at it from strictly a business perspective. I have the business hat on and I say I'm going to build a business, so I need to be aware of the channels and value and customers that are going to keep me in business. And that's an evaluation process that businesses go through frequently, by the way. Board of directors often bring their CEOs into their boards and they ask those questions. They're asking, how are you managing costs? How are you ensuring value? How are you delivering value proposition? Which ones of our channels are costing us most? What kind of customers are we wanting to keep? Which ones are we willing to retain? How much are we spending on each one of those? So change hats just for a little bit. Let me get a little personal and talk about how majority of and how it is that the business perspective in addressing CRM and CM from the 9 building blocks perspective has to also align with the real view of the world. So at a personal note, that picture on the far left-hand side is my lovely wife, Shelly, and I, when we were very, very young chickens. Now, she still looks beautiful. I have aged and deteriorated significantly. And as she's gotten more beautiful, I have gotten a lot uglier. So between 1991, when we first got married, and 2013, a number of things happened. And those are things that Dr. George Levenger defined in a study called close relationships. It happens to be something that I talk a lot about in the book, because when we talk about relationships in general, we have to really address how relationships are built. So if you look from 1991, when I first met my wife, we entered into that first stage, or step A, in which we decided whether there were mutual interests. And of course, there was a mutual attraction, and I saw this beautiful blue-eyed, blonde-haired woman walking towards me at a college campus, and I said, that is the woman I want to marry. Now, whether she looked at me and said the same, still leaves a lot of debate open. But I know that at that point, we made a decision that there was a mutual attraction and a set of interests that allowed us to meet. And so we entered into that step A, which is the acquaintance step, according to the Levenger study. We then entered into more self-disclosure about who we were. We became a little more interdependent in our activities, and we began a phase called the build-up process. During that build-up process, we started to make some decisions as to how interdependent we were going to be to one another, and based on that interdependence, we also opened up to being more self-disclosed. We talked about personal things and family, and the relationship grew from there. Now, during that build-up stage, there were a number of events, like dates, interactions with one another, and more importantly, there were a number of choices. And at each level of the relationship building process, we all had to come to a decision to either continue the relationship or to evaluate if the relationship was growing or deteriorating, or, tragically, for that relationship to end. And so relationships, human relationships, work in that way. Your lives either become enmeshed and entwined, and the relationship is consolidated, or you make a decision as to whether it is deteriorating, and in many cases, unfortunately, you make a decision to end it. In the 22 years that we've been married, we've had to go through that cycle over and over again. We've had to go in, and through our events in our lives and interactions and choices that we've made, we've either had to decide that we wanted to continue the marriage and the relationship, identify whether the relationship was deteriorating, and I'll be very honest with you, there's been very rough times when the two of us were going through financial issues and problems, and we did not see that there was a good return on the investment that we were both making on the relationship, and there were talks of ending. And I'm very grateful that we've continued very strong even to today. When there is an imbalance in cost, in rewards, or risks, a relationship will go through those three steps. It is natural progression of a relationship. So again, if there's an imbalance in the cost as we perceive it, of what I'm getting from one person or what they're getting from me, the rewards of the relationship, or whether the risks are too high or worth pursuing, I make those decisions about continuing, deterioration, or ending. And that happens on and off continually through the relationship life cycle. Personal relationships sometimes come to an end, and when they do, it is exactly for those reasons. It is because we identify whether or not the cost is worth paying, the rewards are worth seeking, or the risk is worth taking. All right, so enough talking about me and my marriage. Let's talk about business. Curiously enough, the same relationship cycle that Levenger identified in the study about individuals is applicable to the way that we manage relationships in the workplace. Without going too much into it, if you take out my marriage and you put in your business, and on the far left, a business that may have started in the 1950s and the way that customers did business back then, or even to today, the way that we do business today. that relationship cycle continues to be the same. Customers make a decision based on their attraction to you as a product or service or company. And in building that relationship, there's a certain degree of self-disclosure that you have to make as you're working in projects or delivering to that customer that will build an interdependence or deterioration in your relationship. And so as that relationship grows, it will go through the same cycles, except with the business cycle, we move a person not from the acquaintance stage, but we actually move them from a lead to maybe a qualified lead to a build-up process where they, through a series of events like presentations, interactions with your company, they make a choice and you make a choice. And let me emphasize that. It's not just the customer that's making a choice. There are times when companies are going to a customer and realizing that it's not really aligning with the value proposition or the cost structure of the company to win that customer. So it could be a mutual choice to make the decision to move that relationship on to more of a customer care or deterioration or fixing a problem with deterioration or also ending, okay? And like with personal relationships, customers make decisions about staying with you and continuing that relationship based on cost, okay? So cost of your products and services or the value of that cost on products and services. So let me make an example. I don't know how many of you have a Keurig machine, but those Keurig machines are getting very, very popular. And so a study came out in the New York Times that shows that the little cups of coffee that you put in the coffee machine are significantly more expensive. Some have said by almost 33%. And yet customers are continuing to buy them. Why? Because to them, the cost is worth it. So there's no imbalance of cost because they're getting what they want. In other words, they're getting rewarded for the cost of your product and therefore continue to grow that relationship. They also assess risks. And anyone who's ever had any interactions with customers for a period of time, you know that there comes a time in the life of the relationship where you and them have to assess the risk factors. This happens not only during projects, but it happens in real life in general, right? And so, like I said before, also with personal relationships, business relationships make a decision to end that relationship with you based on cost, rewards, and risk assessment. So we got the idea of what customer relationship is, okay, in somewhat of a linear way. So from the beginning of a lead, of qualifying that lead, managing the sales cycle, securing an opportunity, selling that opportunity, delivering the opportunity via invoice and quotes and some of the other processes that take place, marketing from the beginning and through that life cycle, and then at the very end to actually provide customer care and support to those clients in a very linear way through a number of steps, interactions, events, and choices that help build that relationship. Where I think we don't manage, what I don't think we manage very well, and where I think we get customer experience confused with customer relationship is in the fact that in between every one of those steps a customer makes, there is the gauging of the experience. When you're qualifying them as a lead, the experience that they have with your salespeople, the experience that they have with your presenters is a factor. When you're building the relationships, the choices they make to either continue or end your relationship is based on an experience. And their ability to interact with you, their decision to stay with you as a customer, and even the decision to recommend to other people is not based on how well you follow the workflow process through the customer life cycle, but based on how that experience takes place between you and the customer. One thing that I tell, in particular, partners that sell CRM is that it's very difficult to go out and talk to a customer like a chief marketing officer and talk in very linear terms like sales, lead generation, lead qualification, sales, opportunity management, marketing, and support from the CRM perspective, when the reality that most people in companies today, and I keep bringing up chief marketing officers because studies have shown that it is the CMO who's making the decision to buy CRM these days under the preface of customer experience management. They're the ones that are making the decision, and in their eyes, through their world, their perspective is that the customer life cycle is not linear. In fact, people today purchase, make decisions, compare, share their thoughts, do the research, search for products and services, make discovery about those products and services. They build trust or distrust and make decisions to purchase or not purchase at any given cycle because of the tools that they've been provided due to our cultural changes. Today, a person could go online and go to a website and make a decision to buy or not buy your product without you ever once evangelizing them about it. They could end up going through a mobility device to a Facebook page where people are talking about you. They could interact from a phone or from a laptop, and based on the experience that they detect from you in one of those devices, they are creating perceptions of your level of service. So the world is no longer linear, and yet we're still talking about CRM in linear terms. And so out of the one thing that I want you to take away today is that the folks that we're talking to about CRM these days are not thinking in linear, progressive workflow terms. They're talking in non-linear terms because people experience you in a non-linear way. Okay? So to drive down a little bit further, and I apologize, I was hoping that we could read this a little bit better. But if you think about customer experience versus customer relationship, what experts are telling us, and this is an article that came out on Wire in January of this year, what we're experiencing or what we're finding out about the customer experience is that the customer experience does not start with sales. So in CRM, we traditionally think, well, the customer experience started with the sales cycle. You know, at that point, they begin to develop experiences about who we are based on our interaction with people. The salesperson qualifies and we sell them. Or if you're a little bit more innovative, you may be thinking in terms of marketing. So the material that we send them, was it right, was it pretty? If you're in the retail business, then you may say, well, when they walk into a store. The reality of this, no matter what kind of business you're in or what kind of vertical you're in, the truth is that the customer experience life cycle, the customer doesn't start at the purchase or sales cycle itself. It actually begins when the customer has a need. And this is a huge change in the way that we address CRM today, because in CRM we tend to think in blocks, either in the bucket of sales, the bucket of marketing, or the bucket of customer service. When in reality, the experience is what's driving business, and it could happen based on where the customer needs it to be. So the customer need, for example, to pair with one of your products. So there's a need from the customer perspective. You have the product, so there's a matching need. The customer could engage through any number of vehicles to do that. Same thing with awareness and same thing with interaction. A person could get on a website and live chat with someone, or go to a forum, or talk to someone in a Facebook page, or address an issue through a LinkedIn forum, and it always has to do with the customer needs. Okay? It also happens to be happening in different ways, and this is something that is fluctuating. So as you look at the 2012 survey that Dreamforce conducted, you'll notice that, again, not only are their interactions not linear, not only are they based on where the customer need is at any given point, but it's also being driven by the way that technology is molding and changing things. There was a time when you could count 100% that a person was going to pick up the phone and interact with you, when in reality, there's been an incline to 60 up to 24% in the way that we use mobile phones, not only to talk to people, but to connect to websites and to launch chats. Okay? With some other means of communication, like a landline, which 5 years ago was about 51% of the usage of folks contacting you, to now only about 5% according to Dreamforce. So the world's changing, our culture is changing, our technology is changing, and so we have to shift and change with it. So customer experience is that number of interactions that your customers have with you that help them make decisions about whether they want to have a relationship with you. So by addressing the two, customer relationship is how we manage and strategize the relationships that we will have within our business, and customer experience is the strategies and steps that we take to actually manage the experience. Let me give you a picture of some recent interactions that I've had, at least over the last couple of days, of, to me, not what customer experience means, but what customer experience looks like, and how some companies are using technology to manage it. So recently, I had to, before coming down to Miami, I made an appointment with my good doctor at Kaiser Permanente, and they set up an appointment with me. And so not only was I impressed about the number of ways that I can set up an appointment with Kaiser, that you can set up through an IVR, you can use a real person, you can do a chat, they have an app, they have a website. But what really impressed me about this interaction is that as I was talking to the agent said to me, just to let you know that I went ahead and noted all the information that you just gave me so that when I transfer you over to the appointments desk, you don't have to give that to them again. Now, that is a purposeful strategy intended to improve my experience. But that experience is enhanced by technology like CRM to give that agent the ability to move information that's been captured all the way from the IVR, all the way through my interaction with them, all the way through identifying databases that have my member information, to the technology that allows that experience that I just had with the first person to be transferred to the second person so that I don't have to go through having to repeat, which traditionally decreases the index of customer experience down to the negative when it comes to phone interactions, okay? My second interaction this week was with Geico, and it had a lot to do with my 20-year-old son now starting college and moving in back with us, which was an experience in itself. And so as I was working with Geico, one of the things that they said to me was, hey, before you go, I want to thank you, and I want you to note this very specifically. They didn't say, thank you for being a Geico customer. That was the obvious. I had an ID. She has checked my information. She knew I had a policy with them. But what she said was significant. She said, thank you for being our customer for the last 10 years. Do you have any questions? And then she actually stopped and said, hey, I see that you have a 2001 Dodge Durango that has too much insurance on it. Would you like me to go ahead and lower that and work for you to lower the cost? Again, these are practices and strategies that are driving customer experience using CRM and the technology that's built within CRM to enable and to enhance that experience. Now, the last one may seem kind of silly to you, but it was extremely important to me, and that was, with our good folks of Fuddruckers. Oh, Jason, did I lose the connection?
No, you're still here. I think you went quiet for 1 second, though. Yep. Perfect.
Sorry about that. My phone fell down. Sorry about that. I was thinking about hamburgers so much I get all frazzled and dropped the phone. All right. So Fuddruckers, we went to the counter at Fuddruckers, my wife and I, and we ordered a hamburger. And it was really interesting how the attendant came back to me and said, hey, it's actually cheaper to do the quarter pounder or the third pounder cheeseburger and add the bacon than if you had ordered a cheeseburger like you order it with bacon. Now, again, that is a testament to very well-trained folks who are there to make sure I have a good experience. But it is enhanced by technology, which they have set up in such a way that if a price actually matches, they can actually see a better deal on the point-of-sale service system, that they can actually talk to the customer and offer a better deal. Those, again, are just examples of how we're using CRM to enhance the customer experience. Now, one of the problems that you may be experiencing today in terms of why we keep differentiating and creating silos of the folks that are managing customer experience versus the folks that are managing CRM is partly, not completely, but partly because of a statement that came out years ago that said that over 50% of CRM implementations fail. And so what I encourage you to do, and I address this in the book as well, and I encourage people to kind of take on the mantra and stand up for CRM in this area, is that the study wasn't saying that 50% of CRM implementations fail. It says very clearly that 50% of CRM implementations were viewed as failure from the customer's point of view, not because they didn't have a good system or the right screens or the right workflow, but because it did not meet expectations. And when we tie into the fact that customer experience is driving business today, then this makes perfect sense why it is that so many CRM projects are in fact failing. And it is because we are not asking the question of expectation. Expectation drives how we manage people and how they rate the experience. That study, by the way, launched us into a spiral that kind of caused us to want to change CRM. And I kind of joke to people that CRM has kind of become the P. Diddy of technology. And if you've ever heard of Mr. Sean John Combs, the gentleman, based on his music type, delivery of the music industry, things that he's doing within it, the way that he wants to perceive, some negative comments that people have made about him, have changed his name several times. So we don't want CRM to become the P. Diddy of technology. We want to acknowledge CRM for what it really is and build technology that addresses our strategies for building relationships while also addressing the need to manage customers at the experience level. Okay? So to kind of give my boss, Dennis DeGregor, a little plug, if you've ever read this book, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. His book is entitled The Customer Transparent Enterprise. And what he says is this. He says this very, very plainly. And I'll go ahead and read this. Customer transparency makes internal departments and business units invisible to customers by providing one system for customers and employees to communicate. So in other words, that dialogue that you're having with customers and those interactions that you're having, the technology that you use to deliver that should be transparent to the user. Okay? All right. So I promised you that I would tell you a little bit about what Forrester is saying and why it's shaking the market in such a way. And I'll set it up by telling you this. CRM, as people have marked it as failure or failure as an implementation, and as it continues to have a bad rep because of misunderstanding of that statement from Forrester and Aberdeen Group, it's causing people to ask the question, where do we really get value? Is it really CRM? Should we be investing in CRM? And so Forrester is coming back in kind, doing studies, like I said, that have been done periodically over the last 4 or 5 years that are telling people that, in fact, CRM is a stable platform for managing strategies, but CRM as a strategy alone is not strategically and effectively managing the interactions with people so that they can gauge how their customer experience went. The index, which was done across multiple industries, looks like this. And it actually returned 3 very specific loyalty metrics that have to be implemented not only into CEM as a strategy, but also into CRM. And they are these 3. When people were asked about the correlation between loyalty and their experience, okay, they said that based on whether they liked or didn't like the company or had a good or bad experience, they would be willing to consider the company for another purchase. In instances where the experience was negative, a large percentage said that there was a likelihood that they would switch to another business, a comparative business, or a competitor, and that 64% said that there was a high likelihood that they would recommend to a customer or to another customer or colleague based on a positive experience. So if you look at the matrix from the negative to positive, It's very significant that 71% would recommend you, that 64% would, that 71% would stay with you, 64% would recommend you, but as much as 42% would drop you based on a negative experience. Okay? This is significant across some very specific industries. So Forrester found that not only were those three factors very key to customer retention, recommendation, and progression, but that there were certain industries that based on the percentage of willingness to consider the company for another purchase, as well as likelihood to leave the business, and also likelihood to recommend, Forrester tells us that the airline industry, the banking industry, and more specifically card processing, and some of the other industries listed there were at the very top of the list of companies that should be investing heavily into the customer engagement management model. Okay? And companies like Temkin and the Temkin Group are basically saying the same thing. They're saying that there are some functional, accessibility, and emotional components that must be integrated into CRM for CRM to be effective. Okay? Okay? All right. So I joke about this, but it's very, very true. And I joke about the song, you know, Ebony and Ivory. I'm not going to sing it, but maybe we need to start singing the CRM and CEM song side by side in my piano, right? By the way, if you catch me after this, I may sing it for you, but I'm not going to sing it for you here. But it's like the song, right? That, you know, the keys are side by side, and people don't realize that both need to be used in harmony to produce a tune. And in this instance, we have to learn to use CRM and CM as a single tool with unified strategies in order to deliver. So here's a picture of what I'm talking about. Traditionally, if you look at the outside of that circle on the right side, we have CRM, which manages strategies from sales, support, and marketing in order to deliver a product or service and to move a customer through the customer lifecycle. The inner circle in yellow are the channels that we're using or we use to deliver that. And we know that technology allows us to do that. And we also know in the inner circle that we're able to deliver from the customer perspective, they're able to access us through a number of devices. The question we need to be asking today is our CRM strategy effectively using those channels and leveraging those devices and channels from the customer perspective to answer these three very important questions from the customer? And if, you know, I'm sure this presentation will be available to you. If not, send me an email. I will send you the presentation. But you've got to ask these three questions to address your success. First, the functionality question. Okay? The customer is asking you, was I able to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish? When they go to your website, when they interact with your CRM system, when they go to your portal, are customers answering yes to the question, was I able to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish? And the second equally important question, the accessibility question, was it easy for me to interact with your company? Okay? Why? Because both questions are going to result in an emotion. And this is the hardest thing to manage in this CEM, CRM equation, which is people are going to make a decision that is based on emotion. When they ask the question, was I able to accomplish what I wanted, and was it easy for me to interact with the company, the emotion that ensues is the emotion that will either make a positive mark or a negative mark in your relationship with the client, okay? And from the customer loyalty perspective, always remember the matrix and the customer experience index, okay, that says that positive experience will cause in recommending, they will tell people about that experience, it will result in purchase, and also they will buy more products and services, which is really what we're in business to. And a negative experience will cause the customer to switch and go someplace else for their business, okay? All right. To wrap up the presentation today, I want to show you a couple of numbers that may or may not shock you. And I hope that if you are on the CRM strategy part of your business, that you have seen these numbers, but they're very shocking, and they come from various sources. I've actually gone out and did some research and brought the statements from different presentations out to a single presentation. So I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but what you don't want from the customer perspective is for 86 of your customers to quit doing business with you. And that's exactly what's going to happen when they have a bad experience. So across multiple industries, across multiple theaters of business and regions, we're finding that a total of 86% of customers that leave because of a bad customer interaction. We also know that 91% of unhappy clients will not willingly do business with you or your organization or your partners, again, when they have a negative experience. Which, again, if you are following the social cloud and you're following social tools, and if your company has in any way integrated to accessing what people are saying on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and in other places where they can communicate socially with folks online, you know how quickly a negative interaction can happen, and how negatively a person will post against your company if they have the means. Okay? Now, it's also true that a 2% increase in customer retention has the same effect as upping your costs, or it has the same effect as decreasing your cost by 20%, which if your company is a multi-million-dollar company, a 10% decrease in cost is very significant. Okay? And finally, a couple of more quotes. It's easier to get customers to buy 10% more, basically when they're happy. Now, my company, HP, makes business in the billions of dollars. I think that our last numbers for last year was $230 billion. And I look at this number that comes from Will Research and in conjunction with Genesis. And I see that they're telling us that across all industries, $83 billion is lost each year because of folks that perceive their experience with vendors as negative. It really blows me away. And so I'm hoping that as we correct some of the deficiencies, some of those $83 billion will actually fall back in the pockets of some of you who are on the phone today. All right, so in conclusion, where do we go from here? And specific to Microsoft Dynamics CRM and the strategies and solutions that we're building with them, what do we do? Well, my recommendation to you as you contemplate what your company is doing with customer experience and how it is defining it as a parallel and supporting strategy to CRM, I recommend that your first step be that you step away from the technology for a second and start talking about business decisions. Start having business decisions about where CEM fits and how you're going to integrate experience management into your customer relationship strategy before you make technology decisions. Now, those of you who have already made the investment in technology, in particular if you bought Microsoft CRM already, it is too late. I engage clients at all levels all the time where we put the technology talk and the conversation about customizations aside, and we go back to talk about business, right? We talk about that high-level business picture of the 9 building blocks, and we ask questions about how much things are costing us and how much can we be investing to allow our technology to build positive customer experience with our customers, okay? Same thing with processes. I think with Dynamics, it's so easy to use that we have a tendency to jump right into building workflows without building business processes that those workflows will drive. So my recommendation, again, is step up, go to the business discussion, and then come back to the technology and talk about the business processes and the workflow that's going to manage it. The third thing that I will recommend at this point, again, whether you've implemented CRM or not, is that you start fine-tuning the way that your interactions work. And earlier in the presentation, I was telling you about Dynamics and how easy it is to go in and make a phone call or do a presentation and then record a history of that interaction in CRM. But what I recommend highly and as soon as possible is that you start customizing those screens to also reflect where doors were opened or closed for the customer experience, okay? Now, whether it is to add fields or whether to add workflow, it's important to address that right off the way, that you take those interaction screens and those activity screens and you build them not just to record history of the interaction, but to gauge the level and quality of the experience. That's very, very important, okay? So whether it be customizing it, make sure that you also add specific measures. So whether it be drop-down boxes or whether it be additional fields of text, whatever it takes in order for you to collect information that is very specific to experience measurement. What do I mean by that? I recommended to a client recently that they make as simple a change as going into the activity screen and adding a drop box that just had a yes or no as to whether the experience was positive or negative as perceived by the salesperson. So even a very, very small investment allows you to roll up many of that information, a lot of that data, into useful analytics that you can use to assess how customers are perceiving the experience. So this customer in particular, to give you an example of this use, by simply going in and putting a drop-down box where the salespeople and the marketing folks and the customer service folks clicked a little yes or no as to their perception that the customer, hung up the phone and they had a good experience or negative experience, allowed this customer to assess their level of customer experience and modify their workflows and business processes in CRM to be able to meet that need. All right. So at this point, I want to thank you for your time, and I know that we probably have some questions. So let me go ahead and do that. Jason?
All right, thanks so much, JC. And yeah, to everyone on the line, you can use the chat or the Q&A blocks on the right to ask your questions, share your experiences, and I'm sure JC will be happy to answer some of those. JC, one question maybe to start. Out of the folks who are talking about whether they're engaged, or whether they're dealing with customer engagement right now, most people said no. There was basically one response of yes. Was that surprising to you? From just
no,
the
actually,
audience?
yeah. From a different perspective, like from the customer relationship perspective, no, because a lot of times people, like I said, they think in linear terms. They don't think about the experience the customer's having. They think that maybe the marketing or survey or customer service is going to follow up with that. And so, yeah, we often leave it out. But no, I was not surprised. I was also not surprised here that a lot of the CEOs who are at the event were asking the question, hey, how do we integrate both strategies to make it into one?
All right. You kind of ended there talking to some extent about gauging the level of customer experience or gauging the quality of it, and in the case where, let's say, you are able to start gathering some measures of customer experience coming off of interactions. What are some next steps? Let's say you do get the metrics and you find out that people are having negative experiences. At a management level, what are you going to do to sort of turn the boat around or sort of change the trajectory so that you can get those numbers to shift toward more positive experiences? Are there typical things you start to look for if there is a change needed?
Yeah, well, let me talk about the three things that usually happen after an analytics or report comes back showing customer experience matrix. So there's going to be usually three things that are going to happen. The first is analytics usually unveil a need in a specific area, and so that need is going to either drive human behavior or it's going to drive needs in deficiencies you have with technology. And so I'll give you a couple of examples from companies that I worked with recently. So we had a company that ran analytics against customer service, and it returned that their number one reason for marking negative in their surveys or saying that they have a negative experience is that it took too long to get through their website to the product that they needed. So that is not a change in behavior, it's actually a change in technology. And so So you'll start to pick those up. So again, it'll generate a change in behavior, or actual people. It'll generate a change in technology, or it may generate a change in strategy. So depending on what the results are, you'll definitely see one of those three things will have to be changed. And just to let you know, I put those numbers up there for a reason, and that's because a lot of times customers say, well, you know, it's fine. So, okay, people are having problems with the website, so the form didn't fill out correctly. Losing that customer and the customers that you lose because they recommended that you didn't do business with them is significant enough to make the extra investment on fixing that website.
All right. A question here. Any suggestions on how to politely end or correctly disconnect from a bad customer?
That's great. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I have some preferences, right? I usually, not to be facetious or to sound too good, but I end, when I was doing customer service, I ended my interactions usually on a very positive note. And that's because I kind of backtracked a little bit, and I went back and I usually addressed people's concerns, even the people with the biggest fears, from their perspective, and even the people who were most irate, I try to address from their deepest fear, right? And so when people get upset with me, I usually go right back around and say, look, what are you most concerned about? What is your biggest fear? Because remember, you're building a relationship, and so you shouldn't address it any different than any human relationship you have with your wife or spouse or children or friends. You want to get to the bottom of what may be causing that relationship to deteriorate, and then address it by asking very pointed questions about what it is ultimately that they fear. If you go back, if we went back to those slides, remember what I told you, that people are worried about cost and they're worried about risk. If you can address those things right away, I don't think you'll hang up with a customer that's upset. Now, if it does come to that, the way that I usually do it personally is I tell them, based on that criteria, I say, look, it sounds like you're not seeing that you're getting the cost or the value, or that you feel that there's some risk here. So if you don't mind, let's end the communication now and let me follow up with you at a time or with a person that can help you. And unfortunately, there are times when you just can't help it. People just are in an emotional state, and there's nothing you will ever be able to do or say that will keep you from doing that.
All right. A related question here. Our prospects are generally always interested in what we have to offer, but when we lose a deal, it's because our biggest competitor was the status quo and the prospect chose to do nothing. Do you have any suggestions on addressing this situation?
Well, even that question kind of prompts me to ask another question, which is how do you know today, that your customers are leaving you for certain reasons? That would be my number one question. I mean, if you've run analytics and you've gone out and asked the questions to the customer, and you have surveys that quantify that they're in fact leaving you, yeah, I will pay close attention to that. One recommendation that I've made to a couple of clients over the years is to do a post-mortem interview with a client. And there's nothing in the book ever that says that once a customer decides to leave you, unless for legal reasons they tell you they don't want to be in contact, they don't want to be in contact again, there's nothing that really keeps you from calling a customer back and saying, hey, we'd love to have your business back, but more importantly, we want to improve in the areas where you feel we did not service you, where your experiences were dissatisfactory. So can you share with us what those are? I think you're going to get a lot more insight that may cause you to realize that maybe they're not leaving you for reasons that you think they're leaving you. Now, if your competitor has a competitive product that in fact is better or better price, then that's a different story, right? Those are other issues that will have to be solved.
Okay, we are a few minutes past the end of the hour, and looks like we are through our question queue here. So why don't we start wrapping up? JC, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure.
And thanks to everyone in the audience for coming and for sharing your questions and your feedback. I really appreciate it. So thanks. Have a great day. Keep on the lookout for upcoming sessions from our CRM webcast series. And please do take about 30 seconds to fill out an evaluation at the end of the session. You should see that pop up after you close out the window here. So thank you again, and have a great day.